He has been contributing a lot to the field of tumor biology, specifically on the signaling, how the tumor is progressing, and also corresponding to a lot of stimulation, especially from the TGF-beta pathway. He is one of the pioneering scientists in the world, and I'm not exaggerating really when I'm telling that. So it's our pleasure to have him here today, and thanks a lot for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Muhammad. I'm also very happy to be with you, and thank you for your kind words in your introduction.
Thank you, Aris. So as you know, we are today actually discussing here or trying to get an insights onto successful interviews. So we have been asked before by a lot of our people and a lot of students and postdocs and these things. They want to know how actually the interviews process going. And we thought that it's always better if we ask the professors or the PIs who are conducting interviews so that we can get actually to know how the real process goes on. So I have a list of questions so we can discuss about it, and I will ask everyone actually if they have more questions, please write the questions so we can answer it after the discussion. And if we have some time left, we can just open up for the people to speak. But please, if you have some questions, try to write it in the chat and let us know if anything is clear. Okay, so the first thing we want to discuss and we want to ask you, a lot of people, they are asked actually to write a motivation letter. A motivation letter is considered one of the pillars that everyone has to have actually while applying for a position. But I want to ask you as a PI, as a supervisor, how do you see the motivation letter, or what is really important about the motivation letter and what attracts your attention while reading a motivation letter?
Yes, I think this is a very important question. If it's okay, before I answer to this question, I can have just 2 sentences of introduction. I would like to tell everyone something I already told Muhammad. The answers to these questions that I will try to provide to you, I thought about it before joining tonight, and I have done 2 things. One is to give you a little bit of a, if you like, a general point of view, which may be more objective and might represent not only myself, but many people. However, most of the views I will express reflect my own thinking, right?
Yes.
And that's why I actually suggested to Muhammad that it would be a good idea if you have similar kinds of discussions with 3, 4 alternative scientists, and you may actually figure out or find out that different people have different views. Definitely, different scientists put the priorities at different levels, and that is, I think, correct. So, as you listen to my answers, please think critically. That is, I'm not preaching about some absolute truth. I just tell you my opinion. Okay, going back to the question. So motivation letter, is it important? Yes, I think it is actually extremely important. Although I work very close to a little bit more senior colleague of mine, and if you ask him, he will tell you, I never read the motivation letter. However, myself, I always read it. And for me, it is very important because it is a little bit like a pre-interview, you know? And so what is important to include in this letter, I have thought about 2 important things, at least for me. And this is also a mistake that many people that write these letters forget to write about. So when you start writing a letter, when you look for a new job or a new scientific position, usually you have in your mind the idea that you want to sell yourself. You want to present yourself to the foreign, to the unknown future, possibly colleague, in as positive a way as possible. This is good and it is very natural. And as you do that, you forget to actually write why on earth do you write to me? Do you want to come and work with me? So I advise you to actually write a paragraph, a few sentences, explaining your interest in the research of the laboratory, the institute, the department, whatever it is that you apply to. Do not forget to do that. I think this is very important. I will repeat this later on when we discuss interviews. So that means that essentially you have to be studied. It means that you should not be some kind of naive person that says, oh, well, you know, I saw your photo on Twitter or on Instagram and I thought you look nice. That's not the reason why you apply to somebody. We're talking now about professionals' applications for scientific careering. So if you write to me, you must have a reason, and I want to know what is the reason. So this is for me very, very important. Another thing I would advise you to include in this motivation letter is some new idea. So do you have new ideas? And essentially the persons or the people that usually get these positions when there are many, many applicants are not only the ones that have a very, very strong CV, but they are also the ones that know how to express some new idea. So I would advise you to write at least one idea in your motivation letter. So I try to formulate this. So, hello, Aris, I'm interested in joining your lab because of ABC. And since I know that you work on this particular process of cancer biology, I think that if I join your lab, I will be able to contribute by working on this particular problem or on this particular question. And here's the question, here's the problem. And I think that this is very important. Why is it important? If you even motivate that, at least me as a scientist, I feel that you're somebody that has already thought seriously about something, and you have already made the combination of your interest in the problem, in the question, to a particular individual, a particular specific scientist. And then I get very motivated. And even if your CV is not super strong, I think this kind of expression teases my curiosity. You know, it makes me feel like, okay, this person may be worth something. So I should look more carefully into the CV and other details. I should include this person to interview, or maybe I should make a call and try to find more about this person.
Okay, so we can somehow summarize it in just one word. You need a personalized motivation letter.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. So to tell why I'm applying to your lab, what I can actually do at your lab, or how can I benefit?
Yes.
Yes. How will you be getting some benefits from my application? So
yes.
It's a personalized motivation letter.
Yes. And I think the more senior you are, the better to include as a suggestion or interest in a scientific problem, something more global, more theoretical. If you're very young, if you apply for a PhD, it's okay also to say, well, look, you know, I know your lab is very good in doing CRISPR-Cas9 knockouts, and I'm very interested in this technology, and I don't know anything, but I think your lab is one of the best, so that's why I want to join you. But as you grow more senior in your career, I don't think technology should be the only focus. So it would be nice also if you can express a particular interest about a more general problem. I'm interested in cancer metastasis. I think that we do not understand enough about this. I know your lab is very good in research in cancer metastasis. I want to join your lab to study cancer metastasis. And I have some good ideas about this. How about this idea? No, I believe that nobody else has previously thought about that.
Yes, yes. So to have the ideas is something really, really worth considering.
I think so, at least for people like me, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's actually was really, really good actually explanation of how proper motivational motivational letter should look like. But then let me actually go to the next question, which is somehow connected to the first one. So now if you have applicants, let's talk about the PhD applicants first and then the postdocs first. So what are the major things you are looking actually at, or the criteria that you consider while ranking the applicants? So you get many applications, many people. So what would be your criteria to rank, like this is the first priority and this is the second and this is the third? So
yes.
how would you answer this for PhD students first, then for the postdocs?
Yes, yes. This is a very good question. It's also very difficult to answer. And this is where actually different scientists will give you different points of view, I think.
Yes.
It's a very important question. So let's start first with the PhD student application. And I will give you a concrete example. So during the last 3 PhD student positions that I advertised for my lab, I got in each one of them roughly between 110 and 130 applicants.
Wow.
So this is a nightmare.
That's a lot.
Who can choose one person out of 100? I mean, nobody can do it properly, right?
No.
Even if you use artificial intelligence and you have robots to help you, you may make a mistake. And I don't have robots. I don't use artificial intelligence. And you know, it's really, really tough. That's why, sorry, I diverge a little bit from the answer, but I think it's good to tell people. So if you apply to places, especially to places where you know that they're competitive, and you don't get a positive answer, don't get totally depressed. It is okay. I mean, if it is really competitive, the person may have simply not chosen you for totally random reasons.
Yes.
So don't get depressed and feel like, oh my God, I'm not good and my CV is not good and what do I have to do about this? I think you should just do shopping around. Just send your CV then to the second and the third and the fourth place. Okay, now let's try to answer the question. So what are the criteria to use? Since it looks to me like from everyone I see here on my screen that this is an international gathering,
Yeah.
I will start from the fact that you may apply to a laboratory outside your own country. If this is correct, if this is the truth, I think I look, and this happens to me all the time. You know, I recruit many people from abroad. So an important factor for me is the language. So I want to hear you speak in English, and I want to hear you speak in good English. Because, and this would apply even if, let's say, I would recruit only people from my hometown. Number one for me is the communication. And communication in this case means very simple things. We talk about the project, we talk about a scientific question, and then we discuss how are we going to approach it. And we have ideas, we make hypotheses, we decide on some experimental conditions. So for me, it is extremely important to know that when I talk to you, you understand me. And then it is important to know that not only do you understand, but you can use the discussion, the communication with me so that you can go and do something even better, productive, come up with some of your own ideas. So communication is very important. And of course, the number one level of communication is language. So common language in order to communicate. But common language is not only the alphabet and the words, is also the mental ability that would be nice to be at an equal level. And there comes also, again, since I started by discussing recruitment of people from other countries, comes also the cultural aspect. Unfortunately, certain cultures are different enough that generates also a little bit of a gap in the communication. Other cultures are more close to each other and the communication is easier. So when I talk about culture, please do not misunderstand me. I don't know about, I'm not talking about music or whatever, some kind of historical background. I'm talking about scientific culture.
Yes.
And overall, internationally, everybody learns pretty much the same way of thinking in terms of posing scientific questions and trying to answer them. But some people have a little bit of a different training, a different approach to the scientific problem. And so I try through the 100 people that will apply to the position to find those that maybe have a similar way of thinking as I have.
Yes.
That's not very easy to understand by reading CVs, okay? That's why we go to the previous topic. The letter of motivation for me is an important element.
Yes.
Okay?
So now again, we're coming back to the motivation letter. So it's considered as one of the major criteria you taken into consideration, including
Yes.
ideas, including language, because I assume if you read a motivation letter written in a poor language, that means less communication skills the person has, right?
Yes.
Yes. So,
okay, and then I thought to include also two more concrete things. So communication, is a little bit theoretical. It can be interpreted in different ways and so on. Again, for the applicants to the PhD position, if you write that you have already had laboratory experience, for me, this counts a lot. And if for some reason you spend 1 or 2 years specializing on some topic, and this is the topic also that I am interested in, this counts even more. So laboratory courses, but if people had the opportunity to work in a laboratory previously, I think this for me counts a lot compared to a graduate that, let's say, is totally virgin and has only attended classes of theoretical courses. Yeah.
yes.
So practical training is important.
Yes.
To demonstrate. And again, these days there are actually candidates that can demonstrate that. There are PhD candidates that already spent 3 years in a laboratory somewhere, and they even published papers. So definitely these candidates for the PhD degree, in my opinion, will actually go to the higher priority.
Yes. So the same criteria you also using for selecting postdocs, or I think you have some more criteria for it?
Yes, I think for the postdoc, there is some more criteria. So for the postdoc, I will look into the success of their PhD. How successful was the PhD? Now, what does this mean? What is success? Success usually we measure by publications, not only the total number of publications or the impact factor of the journal. I would really like to look in detail into the publication. So that means that I'm not going to read all the publications from 100 applicants, but for those 4 that I will invite to interview, I'm going to check, actually, I will open the PDF of their papers and I will look what kind of techniques, what kind of experiments did they do and things like that. And then the second important thing for me for the postdoc applicant is the letter of recommendation from the PhD supervisor. So for me, this means a lot.
Yes.
And there is no letter, for whatever reason, I count this as a very negative. So if somebody tells me that I'm not able to submit a letter of recommendation, but you have already published 2 papers in Cell and 1 in Nature, okay, I'm very impressed by your Cell and Nature papers, but then you generate a question mark in my head. Why can't you provide a letter of recommendation from your supervisor? Maybe this implicates or indicates that there have been some issues or problems. And if you had a problem with a previous supervisor, why not have problems with me also once you join me? So I get issues and I worry.
But you know that sometimes it doesn't go well with supervisors and students. So let's suppose that the applicant is providing another recommendation letter, not directly from the direct supervisor. So would you consider this?
Yes, I would consider that. Although, let me tell you something about this. I think if your supervisor, with whom actually you ended up not having such a good rapport, if this supervisor is honest and professional, this person should be able to write a letter of recommendation and say, look, you know, this candidate had issues with me and these were the issues. However, at the same time, this person has been doing really excellent work, and that's why we published a Nature paper.
Yes.
Otherwise, why did you publish it in Cell or paper with the candidate as a first author? So I would not be afraid to ask my supervisor with whom I don't want to see him anymore or see her anymore to write to me a professional letter of recommendation.
Yes, yes.
But of course, yes, I will accept a letter from the co-supervisor or somebody else, yes.
Yes, but you need a recommendation letter for someone who is in a close contact with the person who is applying.
I would really like to hear that, yes.
Yes.
If this letter of recommendation is only showing diamonds, only says that you're the super expert and the best in the world, I'm sorry, sometimes this is not totally convincing.
Yeah.
So really good. I would advise you that if you request letters of recommendation from your previous supervisors, ask them also to write something negative about you. It's good if there is also one negative thing that says, okay, you know, this person is fantastic, can do the best kind of scientist you ever met, but you know what, this person is not fun. He never laughs or she never laughs because so it's actually tough to work with this future Nobel Prize winner, you know.
Yes, yes. So you need an honest evaluation from someone who is in a close contact with the person, knows him scientifically as well as personally.
Yes.
Yes, that's actually very good. So now we need good record, okay? And the record is in most of the cases measured by the publication, but the publication does not mean impact factor, does not mean the number of the publication, but how good the work was, the quality of the work, how it is relevant to your current research. Plus, you need also the good recommendation or the good reference.
Yes.
Yes, that's very, very interesting, and I think that's actually very helpful as well.
And the good letter means an honest letter. Okay?
Honest letter, yes. Doesn't have to be like this one is the best, he does everything, he does magic, but it has to be an honest evaluation.
Yes.
Yes. So let's suppose that now you have selected some candidates, okay, either for a PhD or for postdocs or whatever. Now you call them for an interview. So how or what will you focus on during this interview?
Yes, yes. That's also a very important question. I think this is a bit related to what I said about the motivation letter. So from the interview, I want to understand two things. Your interest in science. Are you really interested in science? Or do you want to get a better job in the future or higher salary or something like that? I'm a very fundamental scientist, so I look for scientists. So if in the end you want to become a more successful in sales, great, but then you know, I'm the wrong person. You should not come to me. You will probably fail if you come to me. So interest in science is what I try to discover from the motivation letter and also from the interview. And then I would ask questions related to the specific projects of the science that we have. So typical questions I asked during the interview is, why did you apply to me? Just tell me. So you should be able to answer this question. If you cannot answer the question, sorry. Again, you may have your cell and nature, but if you don't know why you applied to me, that shows to me a weakness.
Yes.
Have you applied to other laboratories? Which other laboratories and why? I want to monitor a little bit, again, your ability to know what you really want. You know what you want. So this is the bottom question. All right, so if you come from a foreign country, I will also ask some questions that do not relate to science, but relate to ability to adapt, to monitor a little bit how adventurous you are. So moving to a foreign country and becoming an immigrant is not easy. And I have very good experience about that. I am one person like that. So I had the opportunity to professionally work in 3 different countries. And so I know what it takes. So I will ask you about your interest to move into my country, which is foreign to you. I would ask you about your ability to actually sustain and adapt to this country. And are you adventurous enough? Do you like to take this as something really interesting and worth doing? Or are you sort of shaking from fear or from insecurity? This is what I would also discuss during the interview. Yeah, ability to adapt, ability to cope with difficulties is important. And finally, you know, the people that work next to me, either PhD students or postdocs, they have to be independent. And if they're not independent on day one of our collaboration, my aim is to see that they become independent 6 months later. If they do not become independent 6 months later, I feel a complete failure. I feel that I fail or the other person cannot. Somehow we have a gap. It doesn't work, the two of us. So I try to monitor this also during the interview. Are you interested in working independently? Or do you want to have somebody that tells you every morning, okay, look, good morning, and today here's the list. I want you to do these 5 things. And please, before you go home in the afternoon or in the evening, give me back the answer to my list, like shopping list, okay? So we need milk and cheese and some vegetables, okay? Please bring to me back these 3 things. So I will ask questions during the interview to try to understand how independent and self-motivated you are.
Yes. So now the interviews assess different levels. One of them, of course, is the scientific level, or let's call it the technical level. So how interested you are in the project, what you know about what we're doing, how you can, you know, like how we get benefits from your experience and things like that. Plus, there is another level, which is a social level, or the soft skills that the person has, and how he can integrate into the new society, into the new environment that he is living in, plus independence.
Yes.
Yes. But Aris, of course, you know that when the people are applying for a PhD, so mostly they have got their masters, or in some programs you don't even have to do masters. You can just from your bachelor do directly to PhD and these things. So the independence is not something that they will achieve from the day one. They will take some time, and it's different from like a postdoc who has an experience maybe in the same country or in a different country. So independence will vary between different people, depending also on their level, between different postdocs and between PhD students, right?
Correct. This is a very good point. And of course, the younger you are, the less the chances one had to actually try different things, right?
Yes.
But again, because we talk about the competitive situation where we have many people applying for a single position, then, you know, even such a young person that tells me, well, look, you know, during the last 3 years, every summer, I worked at the local supermarket, or I went and, you know, became a translator in the museum of my city, or I worked at some place where we were building something, I will take that experience very positively. It is not scientifically related. I think for a young person, it shows that this fellow is not afraid of life, is not afraid of trying new things.
Yeah, that's a very, very good tip. I guess actually not everyone is paying attention to this point.
Yeah.
This is very good, actually, point of view. Yes. So that actually brings me to the next questions, because now we're talking about the interviews, and you must have seen a lot of people, and you interviewed a lot of people, and you see some mistakes, or some negative points that you consider or you take into consideration. So can you tell us what are the most common mistakes you have seen, or the most negative points actually you have seen among the people who are interviewing, either as a Ph.D. applicant or as a postdoc applicant?
Yes, yes. So this is a bit repeating, but this actually is kind of funny for me. But some applicants send massive applications. They actually don't know the place. They think that, okay, this university is very good. They go to the website, they find 10 different names, and they write to all of them. And what do you do very practically? You just write one letter, and then you change the name. So you send the same letter to 10 different people. So the most common mistake I have seen, and I think it usually comes from these types of applicants, is that they cannot answer my question, why did they apply to me? And then they get surprised. They say, oh, well, I didn't really think about this before. And then I actually feel like I'm wasting my time. But of course, I will be polite. I will finish the interview. So another mistake I have seen is there are many people that are a little bit shy and they never want to talk about themselves. Okay, so obviously you have to sell yourself. So you have to say at some point that I think I am good for this and that reason. And for this reason, you should take me and not somebody else. And this is easy for me to say, but it's actually very tricky for the young person that goes to the interview, because you don't know who you're approaching. So somebody maybe wants to hear about the fact that you like sports, and somebody wants to hear the fact that you read philosophy, and somebody else simply wants to say, I'm a fighter and I like to fight, or I'm a problem solver and I like to solve problems. So, but my advice is, don't be shy. You have to say something about yourself, not in a selfish way. It doesn't mean like, you know what, I am the best in the world, or I'm the prettiest man or woman in the world. No, not like this, but something to say, well, you know what, I have been thinking a lot about this and I have tried already, and I have really good skills with my hands, or I am a more theoretical person and I like to read a lot. I can read fast, I understand fast, and I like combinations. I can combine different points of view and different kinds of knowledge, and I'm a synthetic person, and I think that I'm really good at this. And so please say that at the interview. So totally silent people. So a common question at the interview is, do you have a question to me? Sometimes people don't have any question. Well, if you don't have any questions, so please go back and study and think of some questions, right? So it's good if you go to the interview with a list of questions. For example, you can ask very simple things like, before, remember I mentioned the difficulty of going to a foreign country. So if the interview was today and the temperature here is 6 degrees minus and there is ice and snow, and you come to the interview from Egypt, for example, I know a little bit about Egypt, right? You don't have frozen land in January in Egypt. So ask me about that. So how is the winter in Sweden? I think that's a good question. It's an honest question, and it shows that you are actually concerned about that. and maybe you need some help about this. It doesn't have to be only a question about scientific issues.
But Aris, I have a comment on this, because what you're mentioning is really important. While interviews, not most, but at least I know a lot of people who get shy when they're asking about like financial situation, for example.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
That's also a very good question. You should ask also about that, because you're going to move to a foreign country and you need a salary. So what is the salary? Or what? I mean, you don't have to ask exactly the straight question. So how much money will you give me? No, you can ask it in a more general way and say, okay, look, as you know, I will have to move. And so please tell me about the living conditions in your city. And is it expensive to live there? Is it normal? Is it cheap? What is the life of PhD students in your city? What is the life of postdocs? How about social aspects? I think these are all relevant questions.
Yes.
Because these interviews are not only about science, they involve also the reality of living. And I think any good boss, any good scientist boss wants to have happy colleagues. If you recruit somebody that eventually will be totally depressed, the better thing is that this person should just leave as soon as possible, right? Yes. So you want to work with people that come to work every day and they feel good and they're happy about their work. So discussing about this at the interview, I think, is also very important.
Yes.
So if you are asked the question, do you have any questions to me, and you don't have any question, this is really bad, I think, really.
Yeah.
And I had the last point I thought about this is the long-term future. So a common mistake that people make to interviews with me is they cannot answer the question, so what are your long-term plans? Have you thought, okay, you want to come here for a PhD, great. And then after that, what? Or you want to come for a postdoc, and after that, do you have any plans? And the younger you are, the more difficult the answer to this question is, right?
Yes.
So if you apply for a PhD position, you may honestly say, well, you know what, I really don't know what I will do after my PhD. But those that know the answer to this question impress me better or more positively.
Yes, but you also mentioned a very good point of view, is that the applicants should also have some questions.
Yes.
As well. So it's
and this is a very common mistake. People, because probably of the stress, you go to the interview and you feel like you're going to some kind of interrogation, and then you have to be strong to give good answers. And under this kind of psychological pressure, you may even forget. Had a very good question, but you even forgot it because of you're very stressed.
Yes.
To relax during the interview and come up with a good question.
Yes. So an interview is not a monologue, not only the PI is asking, but also it has to be a dialogue. It's a discussion between the PI and also the applicant.
Yes.
Yes, because it's involving two persons who are going to work together, not only one person.
Exactly.
Yes. This was very helpful, I think, actually. And that again brings to another point. So, a lot of people or a lot of applicants, when they apply for a PhD position, they may have not spent a lot of time working in lab, or they may have like just graduated freshly, or their experience are not really that good. So how would you actually recommend, or what would you recommend for the fresh graduates to focus on to have a better chance for obtaining a PhD?
Yes, I think starting a scientific career, for example, by doing a master's degree or a PhD degree, at least, okay, now I'm talking about my area of science, okay? So I am an experimentalist. So all of the work that we do is experimentally based. So therefore, technologies, techniques are, I think, the number one. So if you're very young, the first thing you need to learn are different techniques. many techniques. And actually, the technology of our science has developed so much that the number of techniques are really, really many, many. So my advice is find a lab near your school or near to the place where you study, your university, and push them, if possible, to keep you there for a summer or for some 6 months, and try to learn whatever you learn. It doesn't matter. It may have to do with plants, with animals, with bacteria, with viruses. It can be molecular techniques. It can be statistical techniques. It can be, you know, information technology techniques. Whatever you learn is very good. So then you can say, okay, look, you know, yeah, all right, you're only interested in molecules, but you know what? I'm really top on statistical analysis. Is this something that I can offer to you if I join your lab? So that's my advice. So find some local scientists and convince them to take you for some type of practical experience. Now, some people have even the luxury to do this even in a foreign country. So if you have either the money or maybe you have some family member in a foreign country and you can go and visit them and spend the summer there, and you can arrange also to go to the local university again for practical training, this is also a very strong asset. I would definitely advise that you do that. And essentially, if we go back to the previous comments I made about your ability to like to travel abroad, you can already say, yes, but I have already been to this other country and spent 3 months and I worked there and I did this. So
that's very that's actually very helpful. So try to get training, try to get a chance to be in a scientific environment as much as you can, even though if you're going to spend some time or if you have to travel to somewhere else. So there should be some kind of passion that you are showing to get some experience that will help you. And as you're telling, maybe it's not really related to something like in molecular biology. It doesn't have to be molecular biology. It may be something different, but who knows? This experience may help you later on.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Of course, you know, if the topic of your interest is totally theoretical, then actually the situation is much easier, because these days, thanks to the technology we have for the communications, like this Zoom that we're using right now, then all you need is just to contact some people and convince them that maybe, you know, they can assign to you some books to read and some articles, and then they can ask you that you write an essay or you write some kind of proposal or project summary and things like that. This is very good training also, and it doesn't require experimental technology type of training. So I would also advise that you do that.
Yes. So that also brings us to the next question, which was, okay, so suppose that there is an applicant who has a really good theoretical background about the field. Let's say that he or she is a PhD applicant, okay? Then having a good theoretical background, they have an understanding of the field, how it goes, how it moves, but he or she has never been in a lab, or, you know, doesn't have like enough experience for doing exactly what you're doing. Would you consider this application?
Yeah, okay. So as I said before, my research and lab interest is 100% experimentalist. So probably I would say no to this person in my case, simply because I know that it's quite easy to find somebody else who has some experience with experimental training. Nowadays, even the totally experimental science has become very much dependent on informatics and computer-based technologies. So if what you call theoretical includes some special skills for the use of computer-based algorithms or something like that, in the biology field where I work, we have the term bioinformatics, and you have skills in doing such a thing, I would consider that seriously. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But most likely you would like to have an applicant with, like background, with an experimental background, even though if it's minimal, but at least better than nothing.
I think so. I always look for that. So for example, again, if we go back to the younger candidates, so those that apply for a PhD, I want to hear that at least they took one course which was laboratory based. If they tell me, sorry, but at my university, we only had theoretical courses, and maybe they have read all the books, they have fantastic foundation at the theoretical level, I will then try to call the second candidate and ask the same question. Have you had any laboratory experience?
Yeah. So, but you consider like university projects, if students are doing bachelor and then they have a project which includes laboratory work, and they have some classes for lab work and these things, practical work, I mean to say. So you consider this as an experience?
Yes, I think this is important.
Okay.
And nowadays, many universities offer this type of training. You don't get only a bachelor's degree, but you get a bachelor's degree with some kind of thesis work. And this thesis work, again, can be experimental or theoretical work with a particular focus on a topic.
Yes, that's very important. So let's try to have some practical work, even though if it's a small project, it's a practical class, you have gone through your bachelor degree or something, that really counts and that really helps for your application. That's very good. We have also some questions regarding the Corona time at the moment and the pandemic. So, okay, would you actually consider, if we are talking about this month or this year or something like that, as a supervisor, so would you consider the Corona pandemic situation when you call the people for applications? So let's say, for example, you have applicants from outside EU and some applicants from EU to join your lab. So would you prefer to call the people from EU, since they don't have to get the visa and to go through all this process while the pandemic is going on, or would you postpone the whole position for a while?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's very easy for me to answer. Unfortunately, I do not recruit anybody right now because of this. Because we have the problem to accommodate the people that already work in the laboratory. So bringing extra people just generates problems. So, we have to adapt to working with some kind of precautions and distances. And this is really a tough year for people that are trying to apply and look for new jobs, I think.
Yes, yes.
So just to give you the concrete example, so far in 2020, I received, after the Corona became established in Europe, I received at least 35, maybe 40 applications for a master's project. And I said to all of them, no. So we have though a couple of these master students that have come and will come to our lab, but these are local people that we know them and they worked before 2 years ago or last year. And because we have already an ongoing relationship, I try to make an exception for those. But the people from far away, I have actually an email and it's all the same and boring. I apologize, I'm sorry, but we have Corona. Please write again after the summer or next year, something like that.
Yes, yes. So the pandemic situation is really affecting.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think we have some questions from the audience here. Yes, I don't want to take much of your time, but let me...
Oh, it's okay. I think we should take the questions from the audience. It's fair.
Okay. So there is a question, actually, it looks to me very interesting, that it's in a different subject, which is in ancient history. Okay, so as you know, just to summarize the question is that the applicant has done a PhD in a good thesis, really good thesis, but actually no publications so far. So do you think that the applicant, if he or she has a good thesis, but not the application, but not without papers at the moment, he or she can convince the PI actually to take him or take her? So like good thesis is enough actually to get a position as a postdoc.
Yes, yes, I understand this. Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, you know. So I am aware that certain universities have PhD students that get these monographies that you write a book.
Yes.
I think it's okay to write a book, and it's possible that in this book there is excellent science. I don't know. So theoretically, I want to say, yes, I should look also into this case of the candidate without publications. But when you compete with others that have the publications, it feels, I think I am biased. So I will go for those that have the publications.
Yes.
So I apologize to those people that only wrote a book as a thesis. You know?
Yes, yes.
Unless I can think at least of one way you can convince me. In your motivation letter, you wrote a very smart and very good statement, explain this and tell, okay, Dr. X, as you will see in my CV, my PhD is like that, and I have no publications, but I think that my PhD is equally competitive to those that have published for these reasons, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then if you motivate like this, again, you will tease my curiosity and I will look into your application more carefully.
Yes, we had one question actually was somehow similar to what we're telling at the moment by proposing new ideas in the motivation letter. So you think it's a smart way of writing the motivation letter by including a new idea or a new perspective that the applicant wants to do at the lab?
Yes, and here I would like to give you also a technical clue.
Yes.
Don't write a motivation letter which is 10 pages. You should write a motivation letter which is hopefully only 1 page. But then, if you have this fantastic idea, if you want to develop it, maybe you need extra space. I would write an attachment to your motivation letter and say, okay, look, I have this fantastic idea. I think that this applies really, really well to the interest of your laboratory. Please see my attachment. And then you write an extra half page or a page where you develop these specific ideas. Yes, I think, with all honesty, I think some really famous scientists recruit only people that can express this type of original idea, right?
Yes, yes, that's very smart, and I think it's a very good suggestion to include.
And most of the times, of course, when you are at this level, usually you don't send letters sort of randomly to around the world. Then you probably know somebody or 2 or 3 people. You contact them in a more personal way. Maybe you had the opportunity to go to a conference and then you go and meet them there at a coffee break or at some lunch and say, okay, look, Dr. X, I really want to talk to you. I have this excellent idea. Please give me half an hour or 20 minutes. Yeah.
So you encourage also the people to go for conferences, for meetings, and go directly to the, you know,
yes.
to the, yes.
Yes, don't be afraid. So if you're very young and you think that you want to meet the super famous scientists, don't be afraid. My experience is that the more famous a scientist is, the more interested they are to meet young people. And they also have, you know, there are 2 aspects into that. There is the aspect, okay, that you just entertain. So you entertain this famous scientist, and usually you feed into their, if you like, their egotism and their a self-confidence profile. So don't be afraid, just approach them and say, okay, look, you know, my name is X and I have this interest. And but then when you take this approach, again, you have to do a little bit of homework. You have to think a little bit, how can I approach this person? Ah, okay, look, they recently published about this, and I understand that. Okay, I take this as an example. So I come to you and I say, okay, Dr. Ali, you just published last month about this molecule, which is called RNA. And you know what? I'm really interested. I want to ask you a specific question. And then, of course, the answer you will get is yes, ask the question. And after that question, then you can come to your personal real interest and say, okay, look, now, is it okay if I ask a second question? My second question is that I'm really motivated and I like your research. How can I join your lab?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's very good strategy. And if just in less than 1 minute, I can also add to what you're telling by some of my personal experience. Before going to a conference, I was doing a kind of background research about the participants who are there from the index book. You know, you get the list of the people, the talks and these things. And if someone is interesting to me, so I just read what he or she has been doing, and then I go and talk to them. So we need always to do this kind of checking on the people who are attending, yes, who are going to give talks, these things. That's very helpful. I
think that if you listen to what Muhammad Ali says right now, this is super important. It shows that you're very serious. It's high. This is the highest level of professionalism compared to people that go to conferences just because it is in a beautiful city like Cairo, and then they want to visit the pyramids. Okay, sorry, the pyramids are very interesting, but we're not talking about that right now. Okay.
That's true. I have one interesting question. It's regarding right now when we talk about the experience. What about virtual labs? There are some universities or some programs right now, they have turned it into virtual labs. And you know that actually it's a very growing field right now with augmented reality and these things that you can see a lot virtually.
Yes.
Do you count this as an experience?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have experience with that, but I am aware of the fact. And I think this is a very interesting prospect, not only for the future, but even today. So, but I personally do not have a virtual lab, but I think I would be interested in thinking about this. So again, if you write about this in your motivation letter, even to somebody like me who has never thought about this, you will stimulate me immediately to think about it. Ah, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we can start now to have a first fellow that actually lives somewhere, you know, in Greece, but actually works here in Uppsala.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very good idea, I think.
It's a good idea.
I think you're right. Probably the future will demonstrate that this is an interesting, productive, and smart way to develop learning, you know, researching, doing all kinds of things.
Yes. I have two questions there regarding master's application. So the first is, how would you consider the master's students applicants, okay, for the project? And the second is, a master's student, when he was done with the project, it's more of an industrial application, but it was not turning into a publication. But now, considering an application for a PhD, so is this good enough as well or not?
Yes, yes. Okay, the answer I have about the master may be a little bit boring, but you know, at least at our university, the university centrally organizes master programs. So all the master students that I get in my lab, they all come through the programs. They don't come individually, like I do not recruit master students. I only come in contact with the master students of the infectious biology program or the molecular genetics program and so on. So therefore the application there goes to a different level. It's like applying to a foreign university to accept you even as an undergraduate student, right?
Yes.
The only experience I have at a personal level for master students is the European program Erasmus. Gives the opportunity of a student from a foreign European country to go to another one. And there students contact me individually. And there are, yes, I have actually accepted many such students. But in general, at a master's level, this way, you know, the master's becomes almost like the obligatory first degree. And so therefore, there are already well-organized big programs with courses and so on. And usually at the end of the program, they also send you to a laboratory or 2 laboratories to do some research.
Yes.
Now, I sort of forgot your second.
Okay, the second question was someone who has done a master's in more of industrial application, now wanted to turn into a PhD. So is this good enough, or he or she needs to publish papers or not to be considered as a PhD applicant?
No. This is good enough. The industrial application is if you like, the Ivy League, is the top of the top. Earlier, I was talking about somebody that went and worked at the supermarket or was a translator at the museum or was working in a building company, you know. Of course, if you have experience in a pharmaceutical company, in a biotech company, in a computer company, or something related to the scientific topic, although it is industry, it is very relevant. Yeah, of course.
So it still counts. So I think I have 2 more questions, and I'm sorry for all these questions. Okay, one of them is if someone has got a PhD in a different field and now wants to do a postdoc, but in a different field. So how do you think the applicant could convince the supervisor? And let's take you as an example.
Yes, it's a very good question, but I am the wrong example. So I think, and you know what, we live at the days where this is very realistic. So there is multidisciplinary science, and there are areas of science that absolutely need the cooperation and the intersection between, you know, so they would need a mathematician and a medical doctor and a molecular scientist and so on. My advice about this is you have to find the right people. You have to somehow, when you search, to identify people that you want to apply to for future collaborations. I think you have to find the right people. You have, and today is not difficult. So that means that when you visit their website, it should become obvious to you that this lab or this scientist already works in a multidisciplinary way, right?
Yes.
If you open a website and you see only cell biology, microscopy, nothing else, don't waste your time. I would advise you, therefore, if you're very skilled in some kind of engineering, and you have a very good idea that could even apply to my project by doing some kind of, I don't know, microfluidic system, my suggestion is don't apply to me. You probably waste your time. Just apply to another person that would actually appreciate what you know and could also implement it in a direct way.
Yes. So it depends on the supervisor, right?
Yes.
Yes. It's case-to-case dependent, and plus how the supervisor will get benefits from the applicant, even if coming from a different background. Okay. So
and sorry, maybe I talk too much, but this actually what you said now brought to my mind another aspect. So oftentimes we apply to positions which are advertised. And usually these advertisements tell you, okay, there is funding for 2 years or for 4 years, please apply. Okay, if you're going to apply to such a position which is advertised, and usually they tell you what is about the project, they give you some details. And now you come with this attitude that you know, you are the mathematician or the statistician that can do some extraordinary work. also in a medical research lab, okay, but don't apply to somebody that advertises a position on advanced microscopy. Apply to somebody that does epidemiological study, some kind of other study where the statistics are very important.
Yes, something related to you.
Yeah, don't feel desperate that you have to go to this just because last night when you were Googling, you found this advertisement. I mean, just throw it in the garbage.
Yeah. So I think a last question is how to answer the very tricky question about the long term or the long vision when you ask for an interview. How would you see actually a proper answer to this question?
Look, this depends on every one of us. So some of us already as very young people, even in high school, they have certain dreams and they know what they want to do. They tell you, you know, I want to become the president of my country, or I want to become, you know, a famous writer. I want to write literature. I want to, and I think most of us don't know anything. So most young people have no clue. So you ask them, what do you want to do? And they tell you, why do you ask me this? Let me do something fun. You know, I don't want to think about this. So, so what can I say? So, yeah, try to think about this question. I mean, why? So here's my question to this question. Then why do you want to do a PhD? Why do you apply for a PhD? Because your mother told you that if you get a PhD, she will love you more. If this is the answer, then forget about it. Don't go for a PhD. So if you can answer, so if you apply for a PhD and you can answer, I know why I apply for a PhD, I think you already have half of the answer to the question, right? Yes. Probably you have some argument that can take you into the day after the PhD. Well, I will do my PhD because after that, you know what? I already thought about 2 possibilities or 3 possibilities. I want to dedicate myself to science 100%, or absolutely not. I think total dedication to science is not so interesting, but after that, I want to find some application. I want to go to a factory, to an industry, to develop, you know, better diagnostics for coronavirus, for example, okay? But I understand that in order to become good at diagnostics for coronavirus, I need first a PhD. I mean, I think this is perfect if we take the example, the pandemic, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
You may know nothing about virology, you know nothing about any specific detail, but you have already understood the importance to work with questions that involve infectious diseases. You know?
Yes. Aris, I just have one of our guests want to ask you one question directly, just by talking. So we will have it and then we will end up our discussion. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good evening, sorry. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for organizing this nice interview. And it's a pleasure to have Professor Moustakas in our midst for today. My name is Mohammed Morsi, and I work as a postdoctoral fellow at Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. And I think actually in this interview, you've covered a great deal of the majority of the questions that usually find their way to our minds as students, either master, PhD, or even postdocs. How would we convince the supervisor and what actually satisfies a PI upon the application? But I have actually a couple of questions in the other way around. I mean, Professor Moustakas, actually, my question to you is that how likely, in your opinion, that the principal investigator would consider the satisfaction or the expectation of the applicant or the student upon joining the lab? I mean, is it actually possible that the boss would think about the satisfaction of the students apart from the ergonomics of the lab and all of these things, but in the sense of the approach that has been adopted by the lab?
Yes, I think, okay, so of course the PI is not a responsible person to think about this. I think the person that contacts the PI for the interview should think about this. And this is an excellent question during the interview. And that's why I think the best interviews are the ones when you are invited also to visit the place, right? So one should have this opportunity to come and visit and see, and then you can ask many, many questions. Oh, how does it look here? It looks to me extremely tight, very dirty, totally unorganized, or the opposite. Everything looks like paradise, right? And then in these local interviews, by visiting, you should actually ask to meet the people that work with this PI, and you should meet them privately, and you should ask them, so tell me now, how is this guy? You know, okay, I heard about him or her, but please tell me the truth. I mean, is it easy to communicate? Is this a nice person? Is it some kind of dictator that is waiting the time to cut somebody's throat? Or, you know, I think these are very essential questions. And so I think that's why I said earlier, I think it's a complete failure when somebody comes to the interview and they don't have any question. So everything you mentioned, I think, are top questions that the interviewee should have to the PI, to the supervisor, to the future boss.
But I mean, actually, that.
And if you dare, you know, you can ask even more direct questions. Okay, please tell me, you as a supervisor, how do you deal with difficulties in your laboratory or with people that are very, very independent and maybe they don't listen to your advice? Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I think I said what I thought of saying. Please go ahead. You go ahead.
I mean, actually, that with the passing of time and with the gain of experience, the students actually might improve their approach and how they would evaluate the things. And if they discover that the approach that has been adopted, I mean, the scientific approach, and in terms of the data interpretation, and if the results actually would meet the hypothesis or would be in line with the story of the paper, for instance, sometimes actually that students wouldn't be satisfied with such a thing, and that might create sort of a conflict between the student and the supervisor. And that would bring me actually to another question, since you've mentioned about evaluating a postdoc. Of course, it is entirely different from a PhD, and you would consider the quality of the paper. Some students actually, they wouldn't be satisfied with what they have done during their PhDs. So that wouldn't necessarily mean that he is an ecstatic or she's an ecstatic student, but on the other hand side, also that wouldn't make them incapable of continuing their scientific career. I mean,
Yes.
It can't be an impediment that would stand as a block in front of their future.
Yes, I think I understand what you mean. Okay, if I understand you right, I think you're talking about two things. One thing is probably these issues that are raised between supervisors and PhD students or postdocs are probably things that develop later after you join the laboratory or the new company. And therefore, these things can never appear during an interview, right? Now, if we go to the second one, if something has happened in your previous career, and now you apply for a new job, and somehow you don't want this conflict or whatever negative thing that happened in the past to interfere with the future, I think you should not bring it up. I don't think you need to focus so much on this, right? Or what do you imply that are you afraid that, let's say, in the letter of recommendation, your ex-boss will write something bad about?
No, that's not what I meant, actually. I mean, in terms of evaluating the quality of the paper, since what I have understood actually upon your discussion with Mohammed, that one of the criteria that you would be relying on for evaluating a postdoc is the quality of the PhD work. it doesn't actually matter with the impact factor, the number of publications, but
yes. Now,
how concrete it is and how
let me try to translate your question. So you're telling me now that you have published a paper in a very low impact factor journal, and this is what you have in your CV, and only one paper, and now you come and I told you that I will look into the quality of your science, and you are afraid that maybe I will conclude that your paper is bad, whereas actually the paper is not so bad. Look, all these judgments are personal, right? So, for example, I am one of these scientists that I can read a scientific paper published in the best journal, and I have the ability to completely trash it and find 10 arguments why this paper is no good. And I'm also, at the same time, I can read an average paper and I can identify in this average paper some really interesting and important points. Now we're coming to the evaluation process. So how do I evaluate the candidate that presents these kinds of data in their CV, in their application? You know, I will never get stuck only to one publication. I look at the whole picture, right? That's why I was telling you earlier about being adventurous and will you survive in Sweden if you come from the south? So I will not make my decision only based on a publication. Mm-hmm. I have had many people in my group until today who did not join me because they had the super publications, okay? Even some postdocs.
Yes.
But again, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about a competitive situation, of course, where you apply for the job and you have a dozen candidates, and half of these candidates have the super publications and many, and the other half have only one or few or not so impressive publications, I am afraid that numbers and impact factors will play a role also in my brain. You know, I'm not independent of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. It's again, it's individual judgment from one supervisor to another supervisor.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Moustakas. And
welcome. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you too.
I think we have taken a lot of time, and that's really, really nice. And I think it's very informative. And I hope our audience have got some knowledge and some insights into the interviews and how it works. And I really appreciate your attendance today and accepting our invitation to be our guest today, Aris. And I'm really thankful for you. And I will. Yes.
Thank you, Mohammed. Maybe I can close by first of all wishing everybody good luck in whatever you do, and maybe a few words of advice when you go for interviews for new jobs. Please try to be bold. Don't be afraid. Show some of the good aspects of your character and your ability. And if you carry with you some element in your portfolio that you are afraid or you feel that it has something negative about, I try to ignore it, okay? Don't go to an interview by thinking about the negative thing that has So if you understand the word stigma and being stigmatized, do not stigmatize yourself when you go to an interview. Just ignore that, okay? You throw it in the garbage, forget about it, look into the positive things, and try to be smart and talkative and interesting. Try also to impress people by becoming, so if you're an actor or an actress, this is great. I think it's always pays, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very nice being with you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, and wish you a wonderful evening. And thanks everyone. Thanks for your attendance. And we will have the recording of this video available on our page, and also we will have it on YouTube, so you can access it later. Hopefully by tomorrow it will be available. Thanks to everyone, and I wish you a wonderful evening. And goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.